right, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us yet again. I did mention earlier on that we're going to have a conversation on the national budget 2025-2026. Now, the conversations tonight are simply going to be around debt servicing, are going to be around allocation, also around issues to do with the priority sectors, and then where the money is going to come from in regards to domestic revenue. Those are all the conversations we are going to be having this evening. So do join us using the hashtag NTV on the spot. I am Joram Paul Sonko. This particular one is a special edition in regards to the national budget conversations. So you can easily look into this particular breakdown of the national budget and join us and be part of the conversation. Now, I have two guests this evening joining us here on the spot. I have Jen Nalunga. Jen is the Executive Director of Siatini. She is with us here this evening. Good evening, Madam Jen. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, our viewers, and thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, pleasure is ours to have you this very evening. Now, also on the spot, we do have a tax manager at Ernst & Young, Charity Anicia. She is also joining us this evening to have conversations on the national budget. Thank you very much for joining us, Charity.
Good evening, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. All
right, pleasure is ours having you this very evening. Now, today, the national budget that was presented to the Ugandan, 72.37 trillion shillings. And of course, that is an increment of around 0.3% from the previous 72.1 trillion Ugandan shillings for the current financial year that is coming to an end on the 30th of June. However, the finance minister did mention today that the economy is expected to grow by 7% in the next financial year by 254.2 trillion Ugandan shillings. That is approximately 66.1 billion US dollars. Is this a reality if we are to put it on ground? I'll start off with Jen. Are Ugandans feeling this economy growth, or it is just on paper and there is no way to defend it?
Okay.
Practically.
Okay, thank you so much. Listening to the minister's presentation, he assured us that the economy has grown and it's resilient, and I remember the president also raised it. But maybe Charity, being the tax person and dealing with figures, she can be able to put the figures on my words. But you see, it is true. There has been some economic growth. You know, GDP has gone up, and also inflation has been controlled. Our currency is also stable. I keep telling people that there are countries where inflation can really go out of hand. Our organization will have an office in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And there is a time when you needed $1 trillion to buy just tomatoes. Then they reached a time when the money would expire. Then they reached a time they abandoned their currency, went into rand and dollars and a pula. You know, so we commend government that at least the shilling, you can keep it and you use it.
And it has been performing quite well this year.
Performing quite well, and the economy is growing. But to put a rider there, economic growth doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to have jobs, that people are going to partake of that income. For that to happen, there has to be some intentional policies, strategic, intentional, planned policies to ensure that that money in the economy is directed to the pockets of the people. And that's why you see an economy growing 7%, but people are saying our young people have no jobs. What's happening? You know, so there is that contestation and dichotomy between what's on the paper, which is true, because when you aggregate, and Charity can help us how GDP is measured, but in fact, when we are looking at this budget, we need to look at in the context of that economic growth. Why are not incomes growing? Why aren't there enough jobs, decent jobs for our people? And maybe that's what we really need to look at. How do we ensure that, you know, there are jobs, that the economy creates jobs? Because there is a jobless growth. It's there, you know, money comes in, they are investors, they bring, you know, they invest, but which sectors are they investing in? Are those sectors, Joram, where you can get a decent job or not? You know, so those are the deliberate policies and actions which we need to see in the budget to ensure that that economic growth leads to job creation.
And here it is for Charity. We are having a resource envelope of 72.37 trillion Ugandan shillings, and one may wonder, is it very realistic when you look at the fact that, one, the domestic revenue target is 37.55 trillion. So one may wonder, how likely is it for the government to collect this projected tax plus the non-tax, according to what we are shooting for in the next financial year?
Okay, 7.2 trillion, quite ambitious, very ambitious. Achievable, quite debatable.
And on the side of the tax, the target is 37.55.
37.55. And during the earlier stages of the budget cycle, URA had submitted 33 trillion, and they were required to stretch it to 37 trillion, which is a bit of a tall pole, but it was a call that was necessary given the recent happenings around USAID pulling out. They needed to stretch a bit. So if you look at the 37 trillion, URA is targeting a few of our geese that laid golden eggs. We know who the top taxpayers are. They're published every year. But how far can they stretch to bring that into the revenue basket?
And you know, Jen, as Charity is pulling up this point, I wonder though, when you look back at the recent targets of the Uganda Revenue Authority, they've been falling short. And I would like the both of you to help me respond to this, because they've been falling short. Now, again, we have a 37.55 trillion target that they have for the next financial year. How are they going to be able to collect it, minus making it hard for the taxpayer?
That's a very dicey discussion, because in the president's speech, he was very clear about collecting money from businesses without hurting the businesses. How realistic is that? A bit of a debate. But if you notice, the measures that have been put in place are looking more towards widening
the tax
base as opposed to deepening.
Okay, if you can...
Get more people into the tax basket.
Okay, if you could just break it down for the viewer now, the deepening and widening, how different are they in terms of taxation language?
Okay, in simple terms, widening, Charity is paying taxes, but you are not paying taxes. How do we get you on board to pay your, to bring your part of the bargain, to contribute your portion? You
file your returns, all of that.
Yes, you can file your returns.
You're tax compliant and all of the things.
Exactly. But then with deepening, Charity is a multinational, makes lots of money. How do we get more money from her? We have a shortage. How do how do we drain the same charity over and over to make more money out of her instead of getting more taxpayers on board? So that's how the deepening and widening works.
Okay.
Widening, get more taxpayers on board. Deepening, get the few that you have in the net
and make sure that they are
bring
compliant.
In more, yes.
But again, as we speak, many of them kind of feel like it's hurting their businesses. So we do not know how best we can structure a safer landing site for many of these businesses.
True, it's hurting their business. Actually, in practice, we have clients who are feeling it.
Okay.
They are feeling the pinch. But you see, in the proposals, government is trying to encourage SMEs to formalize their operations with a new amendment that has come into force. The exemption to SMEs of 3 years.
For 3 years.
Yes. If you invest 500 million shillings and below, but it comes with conditions. You ought to be a citizen, and then in exchange, you expect to file business information returns. For those 3 years, while you are getting an exemption, the indirect taxes that you're paying. And remember, indirect taxes contribute more to our revenue basket than actually the direct taxes, the corporation taxes that you're getting an exemption for. So you're paying employee taxes as well. So it's a give and take. You're winning some. I don't want to say losing some, but you're contributing to the revenue basket.
Okay. And Jan, when you look at the government's priorities in the next financial year, there's also reducing on the dependence of borrowing. And in terms of that, when you look at how they intend to do it, is to continue getting the taxes from the Ugandans. Now, many Ugandans feel overwhelmed by the taxes. I don't know how government can execute this minus over-borrowing, because our debt burden is also rising.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to go back to what Charity has raised regarding, and I like the way you have explained about deepening and widening. And what you are saying also, most people feel that it's more of a deepening than a widening. Because you find somebody is paying the pay as you earn, paying the VAT, paying indirectly on excise duties on alcohol and all that. You know, we in Siatini, we came up with a leaflet. We called it A Day in the Life of a Taxpayer. And what we do, we look at charity and say, now charity, when you wake up, will you use toothpaste? This is how much the tax you are paying on that. Then we say you make a phone call, and on that phone call there is so much tax. You send your maybe mobile money, this is how much you are earning, you are paying as tax. And it's a really, really big burden. So I like the whole issue of deepening, because that's where Ugandans will really know that they are the taxpayers and they have to follow their money. Now, Joram, regarding the issue of priorities and borrowing and taxes, you know, when you look at this budget, like you said, it's 72.37 trillion, you know? But, and I think Ugandans should know that we are not really talking about 72 trillion, you know? That isn't the money we are going to allocate. Because already the loans are off. The debt repayment. And I think the debt repayment, Charity, you will help me here, they're about 27 trillion, something like that. So the remainder, you know, and I was reading the Auditor General's report, about corruption, and was saying every year, annually, it's about 9 trillion for corruption. So we deduct that. Then we deduct also the statutory payments. Like salaries, you have to pay salaries. So what's remaining to say this one is going to agro-industrialization, to tourism, is very little money. So what you are raising, Joram, about the loans, the debts, you look at it in terms of the budget, but also in terms of how much we are going to how we are going to collect resources. Because like Charity has said, 72 trillion, the taxes are 37.
0.55 trillion, that is from the domestic revenue that we expect.
DRM. So the remainder, and remember ODA has reduced, you know the Americans, what they were doing, ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, has really drastically reduced. So you find that 37, when you deduct 72, the remainder is it's coming out of loans. So we are looking at a budget where we are really indebted, we are borrowing, we pay, but again we borrow. So I think we also need to analyze this budget in terms of getting out of that debt trap. And I want to go back to the issue that Charity has raised about broadening the tax base. Broadening the tax base means that more people are paying, and that maybe we increase the 37 maybe to 50, maybe to 60, so that we can be able to be able to finance our budget and our development.
Okay, and let me get to Charity here. Uganda's public debt is projected to grow at around 116 trillion Ugandan shillings. That's approximately 51.26 of our GDP. When you look at this level of debt, is it sustainable? And how are we going to be handling all these cases and scenarios where we continuously have to go and borrow to let's say finance the budget, to fuel the budget all the time?
Okay, debt is being indebted is a very difficult place to be.
No one wants to be in that place.
No one wants to be in that place. Can we do away with debt completely? No. And when you look at our sources of revenue, it's debt, grant, and loans.
And some of the grants have already been cut off.
Exactly. And then when you look at all the three options, it's tax that's more sustainable, it's more stable. Of course, you can't tax yourself into wealth.
True.
But instead of relying on these three, why don't we look at investing in taking on other forms of investment? In today's budget reading, the government actually mentioned that they're looking at diversifying into taking on more. Sorry about that. Taking on foreign investment.
Okay. And
then investing in sukuks. If you look at concentrating on loans, we will definitely break at some point. So maybe we could look into structuring our repayments.
Okay.
Instead of paying now, you could probably have an arrangement where you pay later. And then for taxes, probably the widening would work, but also look more into ensuring that the ventures that the government is trying to get into to encourage production locally actually succeed.
Okay. And this is where I want to bring in Jen. When you look at the past 11 years, The government has borrowed close to 43.25 trillion Ugandan shillings, around that figure, and only 26.84 trillion has been spent. So there are questions about what happens when we get the loans. How do we utilize these loans? Because now we have an increasing debt burden, but then we also have money that we're not using even when we are taking the loans.
You know, that's also true. The way we are borrowing, the appetite to borrow is growing bigger. That's why I hear some people were happy that World Bank is back to give us money. But World Bank doesn't give us money. Those are loans. Except that maybe for World Bank, their loans at a bit of a concessional, a lower rate. But the appetite to borrow, even when we are not ready. There are so many projects which, for example, the Ginger Express Highway. I understand the money is there, you know, but there are things which we are not ready, and we are paying commitment fee on those loans. So sometimes we are not ready, and you are right, all those figures which you have read out. So I think it's really important to be prudent, and also when we borrow, where are we putting the money? Because you know that trend, way back, by the way, we used to borrow, government used to borrow for capital, you know, capital expenditures, those roads and all that. But now we borrow even to service our budget, you know, which is a problem. You raised the issue of sustainability. Is our debt sustainable? Government, even in the budget speech, I don't know where it is, but it's there. They are telling us our debt is sustainable because the GDP is, but it's already 53%, because they used to say when it's 50, it's sustainable, but now it has gone to 53. But however, what I want to say is that we need to redefine sustainability. If you are servicing, the cost of servicing your loan is so high, higher than what you are spending on your health, your education, your agro-industrialization, then I don't think that that debt is sustainable. So I think we need to rethink that. And I want us to go back also to the issue that Charity has raised on increasing production. That's one way of widening the tax base so that we can be able to grow the economy.
When we do return, Charity has something she wants to put across, I suppose, but we are into time for our first break. And to you, our dear viewer, do join the conversation using the hashtag NTV on the spot. The conversation is on the national budget 2025-2026. It has been presented earlier today by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Matia Kasaije. But when we do return after the break, we look at the priority sectors that have been outlined in the national budget, and then to see how the funding is coming into the country, and if at all that funding or the allocation reflects to the reality of them being priorities. Stick around. You're watching NTV on the spot. Welcome back. Now, earlier on, during the presentation of the national budget for 2025-26 by the Finance Minister, he also did mention the top earners in regards to the exports in the last financial year, and gold exports were at 3.8 billion, coffee 1.83 billion Ugandan shillings. Industrial products, we exported goods worth 626.54 million, cocoa beans 410.8 million, milk products 265 million Ugandan shillings. And besides that, this particular budget has got 5 priority areas, and these priority areas are anchored on the National Development Plan for the ATMS. This is where I want our conversation to start. Jen, I will start with you. When you look at these particular priority areas, how are we going to ensure that they drive the economy as expected? The tenfold program by the president is that by 2040, we have 500 billion in GDP.
I think that's really a tall order. I agree to the fact that, you know, the drivers, ATMS, that's agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral resources, and science, technology, and innovation, which they are okay, the drivers. But I think we also need to be able to look at the enablers of those drivers. For example, agro-industrialization, you know, which is key to our economy, because most of our people are in the agriculture sector. When you look at our exports you have talked about, those are the commodities which we're exporting, but we also need to industrialize to add value to those products. We need to increase markets. We need to export more of those products. So agro-industrialization is really critical as a driver. But when you look at the amount of money, 1.8 trillion, it's not a lot, by the way, because in 1.8 trillion, we are talking about Ministry of Agriculture, MAIF, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, all that. Then we're also looking at Ministry of Trade, cooperative industry, and all that. So the 1.8 trillion is not really a lot of money to talk about. But when we also talk about enablers, we are looking at putting money in things like standards, because you can't trade when the standards are so low. And our standards, by the way, are lacking. You know, when you look at the products we send out to there, most of them have been rejected.
Well, what is the challenge with these standards? Because it has become a very critical issue. The standards of goods we export are not so competitive, so to say. Yeah. Where is the challenge?
The challenge really, because standards start from the inputs. You know, okay. For example, take an example of maize. You know, even the grain you are going to plant, the fertilizers and the sprays you are going to use, how you are going to handle the maize, post-harvest handling, how you are going to keep it, how you are going to transport it, all that, the entire value chain, you have to be careful. And this is where we are missing out. Certainly we have a project we have been working on in Amuru, Guru, and Eregu on maize, and it was being supported by Trademark and the UK government, Trademark Africa. But the challenges are so big, you know, that it's government needs to put a lot of money when we talk about standards. So that's why I'm talking about enablers, you know, those enablers like standards. Because for me, I equate drivers and enablers to a car. For example, you are driving, you say, I want to go to Masaka, I'm going to use a car, you know, that's the agro-industrialization, that's the car. But you need to make sure that that car has oil, it's serviced, it has fuel, it has tires, the brakes are working. So those are the enablers. And I hope government should be able to look at those enablers. For example, when we talk about tourism, tourism is okay as a driver, but what can make tourism really take off? You know, the roads, the infrastructure has to be good. The environment, you talked about elections, people are jittery. When you see, for example, I'm not going to be political, but people saw what happened in Kawempe, the violence, people fighting. You know, tourists are like business people.
Yes.
They are risk averse, you know. They say, go to Uganda, things are not good.
And you know, we're heading into a political season where many people are uncertain about what happens during that time. How do we, you know, how do we create a peaceful environment for the business people to thrive? Because there's that worry of someone saying, this and this is happening. How do we create that environment?
I think maybe it goes back to our education. You remember, maybe you were young, but we had a subject called civics. Civic education, where people are taught how to behave, even during political, you know, discourses. So, but for me, I think it's up to government really to be able to ensure we have a peaceful election, to ensure that, you know, there are no bullets going around, you know, and that's really, really important. Like you have said, for our business people, you know, because when businesses close, yet the tax people are calling, it also becomes a problem. And also when the tourists say, we wait, let us go to Kenya or Tanzania, we are losing out on a lot of resources.
We are losing out on those numbers. Charity, these key budget priorities, National Development Plan 4, National Development Plan 3 was not entirely successful, but you could easily say many got to benefit from the government initiatives therein. Now we have National Development Plan 4, the government has set out direct priorities. One may wonder, from the tax perspective, how are we going to get this money? Now, for example, from the tourism side, and then we also look into the science and technology. But besides it, how do we attract more pool of investors getting into these sectors?
You know, the way the tax environment is structured, there are incentives, there are advanced capital deductions, and then for tourism specifically, there's tax exemptions on their motor vehicles. But then, if we look beyond that, that's not sufficient. The administrative burden of complying is quite heavy. So how do we make things easy for them? First of all, applying for a TIN is already hectic for traders or taxpayers. With the new amendment of treating an IN as a tax identification number, that's actually a welcome move.
Okay.
Well, it may be a double-edged sword, because I mean people are looking at the privacy of their data and information, because your NIN has all your information, right up to like your village. So you're thinking someone is actually hovering around me with a camera. But if you get assurance in regard to the privacy of their information, it gives them a bit of comfort. And then look at it in terms of someone knowing that they don't have to, it takes out the bureaucracy that comes with applying for a TIN and trying to be compliant. Number two, we have digital platforms that URA is already using. Human interaction has actually been significantly reduced when it comes to trying to comply. So everything is done on a web portal. You hardly have to encounter a URA officer unless it's something that's really, really necessary. So it makes compliance a bit more seamless for them. This encourages compliance, in my opinion.
Okay. Let's also hit the biggest lion in the room in this country, corruption. A couple of times, the reason as to why we fail to achieve some of the set goals in any given financial year is because of the corruption tendencies. we were running a bulletin just a few minutes back, and in one of the reports, a member of parliament did mention that in parliament, one of the biggest corruption cases that Ugandans do not pay attention to is official corruption, where members of parliament tend to allocate money to themselves. So when you look at the corruption issue here, it is affecting all of us because we are all taxpayers. Now in the next financial year, in a time when we are servicing a debt, and now we also have a very small amount in our resource envelope, how do we deal with this? Especially from the private sector players and then to the government.
I think the issue of corruption is really unfortunate, and I think fighting corruption will require all of us to fight it. Somebody was saying maybe it's a mindset change, you know, that we need to say that to change our mindset, but it's a problem cutting across the entire, you know, population. The first time I saw trailers coming from, especially those coming from Tanzania, where they put rice and other things, and they had, you know, these thorns, what's that tree which has a lot of thorns? So they had put them on top of the merchandise. Okay. And I was asking, what's happening? Why are these people doing this? And they said, no, you know, the people pull off the sacks, the merchandise which is on. And I give that as an example of the morals, you know, Ugandan morals, how far we have gone. So the issue of corruption, as the Auditor General pointed out, how much we are losing, but also we are losing a lot in terms of even the institution getting a service, you know, like you said, the private sector, the businesses, you know. So it's an issue which is really rampant, which we need to address. You know, development, we shouldn't be just looking at the big issues. Where is the infrastructure? How much are we putting on infrastructure, on the SGR? You know, it's like a motor, you know. We need that glue which keeps the motor together. And the economy is about the people, you and me, you know, our integrity. So if we don't have that integrity, we are corrupt. You can't even get a loan because we're not, that man, I can't give you my loan because you won't pay.
You know, Charity, I would bring this back home. Every time the salary, you know, hits the account, any salary earner will tell you they will have to do some, you know, computing to see how much they contribute to taxation, how much they contribute to what have you. And it hurts for any taxpayer who knows how much he or she is paying to the government when you hear that money is being misused, or the targeted projects are not complete. You know, we do have quite a number of projects in this country that are yet to be completed, and they're either going into 5 years or so, and we are waiting on when the deadline will be hit. Okay, the deadlines have already been hit. So I wonder, how do we control this? Because some of us do not have the energy to continue fighting the corruption, and yet we are paying the taxes which are being misused.
You know, the issue around taxes on salaries is a sensitive one. So you can imagine what I go through comparing my gross salary to my net. Me who knows how to actually compute what goes to into taxes. Imagine how I feel comparing that to. But it comes down to integrity. If money is allocated to a certain use, it would be, it's up to all of us to actually put it to that use. And then when you look at the portion that actually goes into taxes, I believe an amendment to the salary taxation bands would be a welcome move, because those bands were actually, they came up with those bands so many years ago when the currency had more value, and it made sense then. But right now, lowering them a bit, or a whole lot actually, would be a very, very welcome amendment.
Okay. And Jen, how effectively do the proposed budget allocations to, for example, initiatives as PDM, EMIOGA, climate smart agriculture, address the goals of increased household incomes? Because this is the goal, really, increasing household incomes, improving, seeing that all the Ugandans get into the money economy. But when you look at these allocations, there are chances that it will be very supportive to the households in the country.
Okay, before I answer that, I wanted to go back to the issue Charity has raised, a very, very important issue. The issue of pay as you earn, raising the thresholds, really. Because at the moment, is it 235 when people start paying pay as you earn, and that's less than $100. You know, I don't know the computation, but 235 people shouldn't be paying taxes on that salary. So that's a proposal, I think, which we have also been putting on table to raise that threshold. But then also on corruption, I think that our attitude as Ugandans towards corruption is lukewarm. You know, Joram, I know you have taken some money, but you look nice, you are driving a car, then in church you sit in front, now you are the big man. Everybody saying, wow, Joram has made it. You know, that's how, maybe we don't relate.
So we are viewing it as someone is making strides.
You have made it, yeah. Even in church, you sit in front. Even if you are in the newspapers, you sit in front, and they will say, Joram has entered. You know, so
you become a celebrity. In that regard.
Exactly. So that attitude towards corruption also is really important. To note that we encourage, we abet corruption. On the issue of PDM, I'm happy PDM, they increased the money on PDM, isn't it?
Yes.
By another $1 trillion. And PDM is that money at least which reaches the people, which is good, really. But I think we need to address some issues around PDM. One is who gets that money. Are they ready to get the money? Some people are not ready at all. They are given money and they go mad. I hear some people have been calling it PDM, personal drinking money.
And then we've also got some ghost accounts scenarios where we had ghost accounts receiving PDM cash.
So I think there is an issue of to address the way it's managed, who gets it, and also monitoring how is it used, so that when it's being rolled out, you know, our money, you know, is used where, how it's supposed to be used, and I think that's why sometimes people are complaining that the impact, the actual impact of these projects, wealth creating projects are not felt by a lot of people, and even in the economy, because at the end of the day it would be important to link those enterprises, because they are micro enterprises, but link them to the macro enterprises. So that's why I think there is a lot that needs to be done when it comes to monitoring. Let that money really be monitored. But people have been drinking that money. Some people at first were saying that it's per diem, Now it's personal drinking money, you know. So that shows, you know, that the PDM, although there are some, I saw the president moving around, some few successes, but 2 trillion is a lot of money to just let it go.
I want us to also discuss something to do with the recurring expenditures. When you look at human capital development, some bit of it shows that there is a percentage that is going to salaries. And it's not a bad thing to pay people because they are working for the government. Just last year there were mergers, which mergers were targeting this issue of government spending too much on salaries and whatnot. So how do we kind of try to see that human capital development that kind of takes the lion's share of the programs in allocation is going to benefit the majority of the Ugandans within these sectors?
Okay. You talked about the mergers, the rationalization, which welcomed, which was really good. And I would have expected this budget, you were talking, I was looking around, to tell us that we saved so much from the rationalization exercise. For me, I think that would have been good, so that we know, because the exercise was done to reduce on the expenditures you have said. But on the issue of wages and salaries, when you look at the budget, the wages and salaries are taking 8.57 trillion. And this is a lot of money, 8.57 trillion. And I want us to go back to the budget allocation, that 72 trillion, we take off the
debt servicing,
and we take off the corruption, then we take off the... And
then we're also not certain if the domestic revenue will total up to the amount that the URA has been given.
Exactly. Then now we take off the wages and salaries. Then what's really remaining to go to the actual medicine, you know, to go to actually maybe going to those sectors, you know. So, and this is the challenge of this budget, you know, that when you look at the reality, you know, then the actual budget, to say this is a budget which is going to do actual work, like you are saying, human development, human capital development, education, health, you know, water, it's very little money. And that's why we go back to what Charity was saying, widening the tax base. And for me, I think that's an issue which we need really to dig deeper into. How do we widen the tax base?
And then we widen and then deepen, right?
We do both.
We do both.
We keep balancing.
Okay.
For me, say we widen, we don't deepen. Because deepening, Charity, means that this pay-as-you-earn person who is earning 235, you know?
Gross.
Is that gross or net?
The 235 is gross.
Gross?
Yes.
Can you imagine?
If you take off the taxes,
how much
are they left with?
Exactly. But that's the same person who is paying VAT on sugar, VAT on soap, you know, that's deepening, and deepening is unfair.
All right. When we do return after the break, though, we're going to be looking at e-fiscal, the e-fiscal system. That was something that did create some chaos among some of the traders last year. Many of them even closed their shops. But then, besides that, we also need to look at how domestic borrowing impacts the private sector in regards to access to credit. This is NTV on the spot. Our conversations this very evening are on the national budget 2025-2026. It was presented earlier today, 72.37 trillion Ugandan shillings for the next financial year. Stick around. All right, good on the spot, and to you who is with us from the time we started, we do appreciate your company. Now I'm still with my two guests this evening. Our conversations entirely centered on the national budget for 2025-2026. We've stretched from the budget priorities, talked more about the debt servicing, talked about taxation, and of course we now continue again with taxation, but this time around looking at the penalty system that was created some time back. e-fiscal, last year it created so many conversations on mainstream and online and on ground in so many areas. At the time, many businesses in downtown Kampala even decided to close shop until the government had their say. And of course, throughout their associations, they even met the president to talk about the same issue. Charity, e-fiscal. Many say, from the side of the Uganda Revenue Authority, the penalties are there, and they're going to help in regards to tax compliance. First off, when you look at it as a system, of what advantage does it carry for our tax system as a country? And then will it really help us achieve the tax compliance that we aim at maybe 100%?
You've actually put it nicely. e-fiscal is not a tax, it's a system. And the goal around e-fiscal in full is electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing system. So there was a lot of noise around it when it was rolled out amongst the traders. First off, they were not sensitized enough. Secondly, the administrative burden was high on them, and the cost of actually implementing it was also high. If you look at the penalties around non-compliance, they were utterly barbaric. They were too high. Imagine having to pay 8 million because you have not used e-fiscal to register a transaction worth very little. It just didn't add up. So it was completely rejected by the traders. And then if you look at the threshold, really, because it's for tracking of transactions for VAT purposes. For a trader downtown, 150 million is not a lot of money. So if you're asking them to invest so much to record sales worth 150 million, then they will be overwhelmed. And given it's the informal sector, you need to handle them a bit differently. The sensitization process is a bit different. Get to their level, understand their problems, and then maybe you'll get a workable solution for them. In terms of its advantages, yes, it creates a lot of efficiency in tracking of taxes, because I issue an invoice here and it's already in your system, as opposed to the old system whereby they would have to review VAT returns, see maybe that the sequencing of your invoices is not making sense, and then they will have to come to your premises. Right now, everything happens at their desk. They'll see something is not adding up, and they'll flag it. Very efficient. In terms of it helping in being compliant, yes, it's a very good system. Other East African countries have been using it way before we implemented it.
And then
I need you to reiterate the second part of your question.
Well, no, the question was really looking at how we can utilize it to push for the compliance, because there is at the start many traders were looking at it as it is a tax, and these people are overtaxing us, and yet we are not earning off it. So how do we use this very system? Like you've mentioned, you've given examples of East African countries that have used it freely, and it is a success.
Working, yes.
And here we're aiming at the same. So how do we use it, and how do we use it to to push for the compliance? Because we already have people who think it is...
it's actually a bad thing, no. It's not a bad thing. First off, we needed to invest heavily in sensitizing the masses.
Okay.
And then, secondly, the penalties, make them reasonable. Like right now, it's double the tax that one ought to have paid. So it makes a bit more sense. It's not as punitive as it was previously. So it makes actually people warm up more to it and becomes more appealing to the public to comply.
And Jen, would you like to add something on that before I bring in something to do with credit access?
Maybe I liked what Charity has talked about, raising awareness really, and I think this cuts across when it comes to whatever measures government puts in place. For example, now the EPS, the traffic penalties also, you know, the issue of raising awareness, letting people know what it means, why government is doing it. I think it's really, really important.
Let's look at the private sector. As the government continues to borrow domestically, many of the private sector players feel the pinch. And at times, credit access becomes very difficult for them, especially from the private banks, because the private banks would rather choose the government than the other private sector players at the time. So when you look at this increasing domestic borrowing, it is directly affecting the private sector players. What is government going to do about this? Because it's becoming a serious issue.
It is a serious issue. Because like you have pointed out rightly, that is crowding out, you know, the private sector. If government is also going to the extent of borrowing from the local commercial banks, you know, why should a bank lend to you, Joram, when you are struggling with IFRIS and what, you know, they lend to government. So that's a problem. But government has also tried to put in place avenues like GROW, the GROW project for women. It's in the private sector foundation. There are also the agricultural credit facility. I think it's in Bank of Uganda. They have also tried to capitalize UDB. So
these GROW. These initiatives like GROW,
the GROW, for the women. So there are those initiatives which have been put in place. But some people are saying they are not enough. People need to, you know, private sector needs a lot of money, which is accessible, because there were some people who were saying, for example, GROW, the GROW money, the GROW project in PSAP, Private Sector Foundation, just the criteria, the conditions to access it is not for any normal woman. It's a problem. Some people are saying UDB also, the process is not easy. But however, when you look at the budget, there is an issue which touches on the private sector. Are they called domestic areas? Government has been procuring from the private sector. You know, people supply maybe army uniforms, you know, such things. And when you look at in the budget, what's allocated is 1.4 trillion, yet the total the amount of money which government has to pay the private sector is around 10 trillion, but you are paying 1.4 trillion. Imagine what's going to happen, you know, to the private sector. And we understand a number of private sector businesses have collapsed. Others because they borrowed and maybe put their buildings and land in as collateral. They are losing that. So I think that's a an issue which really government has to look at, because we are looking at enhancing, there was someone enhancing the competitiveness of our private sector. But if you are not paying them, how do you enhance their competitiveness?
Okay. Now I want us to look at understanding the budget. Whenever the budget is being read, I see online hashtags that know your budget. Generations and times are really changing. Back in the time, many people were eager to listen to what the Minister of Finance is going to say in the budget. Now, when you go, during our stories, doing this coverage, you get to realize that not so many people are highly interested in the budget. Why are we in such a situation? And I'll start with you, Charity. Where do you think the gap is? Is the government doing less of the sensitization to let people know how the budget is all about, or is the government doing less sensitization on the allocations of the budget? Because people simply do not want to put their attention to it. A few pay attention and really read through the entire thing. And
when you look at actually the entire budget process, the budget itself is a very beautiful document, excessively ambitious.
On paper? On
paper, yes. But with ambition, there should be a plan. And implementation of the plan has to be as robust as possible.
Okay.
And you have to follow through to see whether what you intended to achieve was actually achieved. So as a Ugandan, I'm looking at it more in terms of people not seeing what's on paper actually come into reality. People there's a lot of statistics. There's statistics on growth and all, but people are not, I would say most people are not feeling it in their pockets. You're saying there's growth, but then my life hasn't changed. My life hasn't improved.
And then there's this, but then there's a section of Ugandans whose life is improving at the expense of the others.
Maybe. Maybe not.
No, you know, when you look at it from, if we think locally now, you realize that the rate of poverty now is just rising instead. That if you are to find a poor person, they're extremely poor. And then if you are to find a wealthy person, they're extremely wealthy.
You're right about that, actually. There's a lot of inequality.
That's inequality.
And I would say that there's a larger percentage in those who are not doing well. So people have become detached to all the proceedings. It's more of how will I gain?
It's all the same anyway.
It's all the same, year in, year out.
But Jen, how do we bring Ugandans closer to understanding and knowing their budget? Because at least they might not be entirely interested in so many aspects of the nation, but you get to realize that these are things that impact on our everyday to-day life, because decision makers are members of parliament, and then after they're done coming up with the bills, the laws and all of that, they start pinching us or helping us move through society. So how do we help Ugandans understand the budget proceedings? And because now we're heading into the next financial year, and that means planning for the other year will eventually start.
I think I want to go back to what Charity has said about linking. That we need to link the budget to the person, so that the person can really, feel that budget, But maybe there is a lot of English.
Into the budget.
In the budget, GDP, inflation and currency, and then somebody, I'm growing my maize. Why do I care? So maybe also we need to translate the budget into a number of some local languages,
yeah.
so that people can be able to understand what the budget is all about, especially by the way the taxes. People need to know that these are the taxes, and Charity, I think you need to do this. You are the tax people. You need to do this. So somebody knows. Take an example. I was looking at mobile money. Mobile money, you pay how much? 0.5% on the total budget as excise duty.
Yeah.
Then you pay 10% as what? You see that at another tax. Then you on withdrawal.
Sure.
Then you pay 12%. You know, so almost 22.5 on mobile money transaction. That's a lot of money, you know. So people need to know what taxes they are paying. So we need to translate that money. But Joram, you were saying way back, you know, people used to be excited because way back, one of the reasons really was that government used to control a number of things, like the price of coffee, the produce, you know. So people would wait to listen. How much is coffee? The
and
price
even today, the president did mention that during their youthful time, they would participate actively in the decision making of the country
because
by
you see,
listening and engaging.
Yeah, because you see, like now, government, because of liberalization, privatization, coffee price goes up and down. You know, market demands and all that, you know, whatever. But that other time, government had to stabilize the prices of this produce. In fact, there was a fund. It was called STABEX, Stabilization of Exports, to stabilize the price. So the price of coffee never went down. It used to go up. So, but to how much? So people would wait coffee, and they would keep their coffee before they sell it. So the coffee, people would be happy. You know, they sell. People are happy drinking because they know the price of coffee has gone up.
And speaking of coffee, I'm sorry to cut you short. There has been a lot of initiatives lately about coffee, marathons, coffee plants and all of that. But I want to open the conversation to the entire agricultural sector. When you look at many of the farmers that we are having, the kind of information we've been getting right from school is that agriculture is our backbone, is the backbone of the economy. And the figures also show that coffee exports are really growing over time. But besides that, how do we enhance productivity in all of these particular agricultural sectors that we have? Because at least milk is performing, but not as much. The milk products are performing, not as much. Cocoa beans are also among the top earners in regards to exports. But we do have a number of things that, for example, meat products. We do have a number of things within agriculture that we can generate income, very good income, by the way. But maybe the farmers are not being supported. How do we support them so that they grow from a small scale kind of thing to this commercialization of agriculture as enshrined in the theme?
Okay, maybe you have, first of all, I think the issue is not commercialize agriculture, it's to transform. How would we transform the agriculture sector? Take an example. Today, we are still using a hoe. I do some farming, but it's so difficult to get a tractor at the district or the sub-county level. We are still using a hoe, and a hoe is really expensive, by the way. People are stealing hoes in the villages because they have no money to buy hoes. And you know, I don't want to digress about who you were asking me about the agricultural sector, but I think it's the same. When you look at technology, the killer, I think they have been given some to do electric vehicles to export. But my hope was that maybe that technology, instead of maybe they can divide some money and they do some appropriate technology which we can be able to use in agriculture, in production. For example, maize. I have been in the village where they are harvesting maize and they are still beating it with sticks. Yet there should be some appropriate technology which is affordable to be able to do the unhusking or whatever. But people are beating maize, and when you beat it, it breaks, and already the standard is gone. So those are things which we really need to look at if we are to transform our agriculture. You have talked about the many products which are there, and there are many, by the way. The president the other time, I don't know whether they are in this budget speech, there were 10 products, and all of them have a potential, and I emphasize the word potential, to be able to generate incomes at household level and at national level. But there is a lot which needs to be done. I give you the model of how coffee has been done. Coffee, the market is clear. The market is there. And we had UCDA trying to enforce standards. Even when you look at the way the research has been done, there is a lot of cuttings, and the inputs have really improved. So if we are to put another product on the market, to encourage our farmers to produce it, we need to look at the market. Is the market there? Because people produce pineapples. Take pineapples. You buy pineapples here on the road. Now there are 10 pineapples. And you just say put there behind. Then you wonder how much is the farmer being paid. And our pineapples, you go to Nairobi market, by the way. In Nairobi, the pineapples from Uganda are sold at a higher price because ours are sweet. The Kenyan pineapples are salty. They are not nice. But we haven't upgraded that. What we are doing is to put some pineapples on the lorry and it goes, so we need to put some more planning in our production, in our marketing. It's also like pumpkins. You go to Nairobi markets, they are pumpkins. But again, there are farmers who mobilize, they put things on and they take. That isn't, development is not by accident. You don't stumble on development. You plan, systematic planning.
Okay, and we have an issue of a reduction in local government financing. And this, in one way or the other, is affecting so many people, from the local councils to the local governments, because they are the people who are watching whatever is happening on ground for the central government. Basically, you look at the farmers, you look at any other person who is producing as little as they are. So when you look at this reduction in the local government financing, how do we, how does the government change? Because how does the government change these allocations to at least increase and see that the local government is prioritized in the long run, so that it benefits and pushes for so many of the Ugandans from the grassroots levels?
So I think I'll take that and then you'll just supplement on it. So when you look at the collection of taxes generally, it's so centralized. And you'll find that actually at local government level, a lot of them do not know what's required of them. All comes down to sensitizing them. So if if we decentralized the collection burden or the administration burden and then take it down to the grassroots, they are more relatable with their communities. They can easily tell them how much they need to pay or what they need to pay and how it's going to play out in the bigger picture.
Okay.
It would be a lot easier to get them to actually cooperate.
Okay. And Jean?
Yeah, I agree entirely to what Charity is saying, because decentralization was about taking services nearer
Closer
to the people, closer to the people. And I understand what, Charity, you are saying. There was no fiscal decentralization. So the money is collected there, it's brought back, then it's taken back. And in that process, even in the delays. But for me, I think we need to look at the entire decentralization exercise, be able to assess it, reassess, is it working or not? If it's not working, what's missing out? We do work in some districts to help them enhance their revenue. And we have done a number of local revenue enhancement plans, the social contract, compacts and all that. But what I have also realized is the systems are not there to collect the taxes. The systems are missing out. Sometimes even the personnel are missing out. And it's sometimes the units are so small, you know. So we need, decentralization is very, very important. But we need to reassess whether it's really fit for purpose at the moment, whether it's working and what needs to be done to improve it.
All right. We are going to be saying goodbye to our dear viewers who have worked with us from the time we kicked off at 10 o'clock. I would want to take your parting shots, but they should be in reference to the national budget and how best we can plan ahead in this coming financial year.
Well, if you look at this budget, it's looking at reducing borrowing, an increase in collections. Look at here is the way our revenue collection is structured. Most of the money is going to be collected by 30th June. That's at the end of the year. But services have to keep running. So it's obvious that probably government has had to borrow to keep systems running. What do we need to do? You know, the budget was vocal about diaspora bonds and then the Sukuk bonds to diversify our source of revenue. That's one. So if we diversify, then we won't have to rely so much on a few sources of income. I don't know how much time I have.
You've just got 1 minute.
Yes. And then the other thing would be, as an appeal to a tax authority, the season is on, but we don't want to be that manager that will injure your good player, get their matches to play ahead.
Okay.
So in the bid to actually meet our collection target, let's be reasonable. Let's not leave the player wounded. Another thing would be that think about this as a long-term thing. Much as I want you to pay now, I'll still need you to pay next year. So in whatever we do, let it be a win-win for the both of us. And to the taxpayers, let's leverage off the amendments that are in place that help us save on our taxes. Look at the amnesty. It's on. If taxpayers pay their liabilities by the liabilities are outstanding as of June 2024, by June 2026, then they stand to have their interest waived. And if you don't have enough money to actually cover the full liability, it's on pro rata basis. Pay what you can afford, and then it will be proportionate to the interest that will be waived.
Okay.
That's a very welcome move.
Right. Jen, in your parting shots, I would like to hear something about foreign direct investments and how best we can execute them in the next financial year, and your recommendations to the government.
Okay. FDI, foreign direct investment, is very critical if we are to achieve the 10-fold strategy. Very, very important. But again, FDI should be directed, you know, to those critical sectors. So FDI is not automatic that when you attract it, it will create jobs, help your economy to grow. You have to be, government has to be very strict. And that's why for us in Siatini, we are calling for the review of the investment code to be able to even to segregate some sections that one is not for investors. And investors shouldn't come here to do small-scale agriculture. No, to grow coffee. No, don't grow coffee. Let us grow coffee, add value. You know. So we need to direct, you know, investment to our aspirations. Then. Lastly, maybe on investment again, the issue of providing jobs is very important, and decent jobs. The issue of technology transfer and skilling our people is also very, very important. The issue of human rights. You know, we have seen investors treating our people like we are half human. You know, that isn't right. So we need to put that in our laws, you know, so that investors are also penalized. Because you see, we give investors a red carpet as if they are doing us a favor. You know, investors, it's a win-win-win. And even investors should respect our environment. So it's a win-win-win for the investor, win for the Ugandans as employees, win for government to get taxes. We shouldn't be giving them tax exemptions. Lastly, I think what's missing out a lot in this budget is the external environment. You know, the way we are discussing the budget, it's like we are operating in a vacuum, but we are operating within an environment which has challenges, presents challenges to us, but which also provides opportunities. Take an example of the EAC, the region of the East African community. By the way, that's where we have a surplus when it comes to trade. And that's where we are even trading value-added products within that region, cement, steel, plastics. You know, so we need to be conversant around the external environment. The Trump tariffs. We need to say, how did they affect our economy? How do we mitigate that? There is the Continental Free Trade Area for the entire Africa. How do we position ourselves to be able to partake of that market?
All right. And to you who has been part of this entire conversation, thank you very much again for your company. We do come to the end of our conversation this evening. My two guests, one is Jen Nalunga. Jen is the Executive Director of Siatini, Uganda. She's been part of the conversation. And then I've also had Charity Anisia, who is the Tax Manager at Ernst & Young. The conversation has been around the national budget for the financial year 2025-26, and of course looking at it in context with the on-ground reality, how it affects you, how it impacts you, and why you need to know your budget. An extensive post-budget analysis breakdown will as well come tomorrow on NTV, so do make sure you tune in, and of course more conversations around the budget will definitely be coming your way here on NTV. I'm Joram Paul Sonko. You've been watching NTV on the Sport. Have yourselves a good evening and a good night.